Hi, this recording is a presentation on how nature-based solutions have been used in Cumbria over the last few years, our journey of how we got to where we are now, what we've learnt, and what the future looks like. So the image you see is some conservation volunteers from Kendal who have been instrumental in trialling some natural flood management above their town. And it's with the helps of volunteers and other organisations like this that we've managed to do as much as we have within Cumbria over the last 5 to 6 years. So how did we get here? So to some extent, Storm Desmond was the catalyst for how we started to use sort of nature-based solutions and natural flood management, primarily because it became very obvious with that flood and others as well that trying to only deal with flooding when the water was in the rivers was already a little bit too late. So it was an attempt to try and understand what we could realistically mop up in a landscape, how we could evidence that, and how we could implement that at a scale big enough to try and help people. Obviously, Cumbria's unique characteristics play a little bit of a part in that. We have some of the fastest reacting catchments in the country. We also sit in the prevailing westerlies, and we've got a lot of very tall hills that catch water and tend to, unfortunately, give us a little bit more of it than most of the other parts of the country. In just after Desmond, about sort of 6 months to a year after Desmond, a pot of money was made available through DEFRA and the Environment Agency, looking at ways to implement NFM within catchments and to look at how that could be implemented and what the results of that would be if you did it. We were lucky enough to manage to secure £2.4 million worth of that money. And we ensured that we had a partnership with Lancaster University to research and analyse the results of that funding. So we implemented about 17 projects across the county, looking at different ways that we could try and help people, because we needed to understand things like how did NFM work in different types of landscape, in terms of like on a woodland or on a floodplain or on farmland, and then how we could implement it and what sort of costs would be associated with that and what the benefits would be. More recently, we applied for another pot of funding that was made available, which is a resilience innovation project, through again funded through DEFRA and the Environment Agency, and we've managed to secure some funding for that as well, and I'll go into that in a little bit of time. So NFM in Cumbria, we did about 17 projects across the county with the specific NFM money, but with other projects that we've done with our partners, the likes of Rivers Trust, Wildlife Trusts, National Trust, and Forestry Commission. We've done projects right across the country. We've done about 18 projects within the NFM programme, and then we've probably got about another 10 that have been done through the RFCC's funding as well. These were implemented in a wide variety of landscapes, so within forestry settings, on peatland settings, on farm settings, and in kind of sort of more kind of semi-urban settings, so immediately above town. So in the images, the top left-hand corner is some large leaky dams put in within the Forestry Commission's estate. Top right-hand corner is a very large bund that was put in to help protect the people in Grange. And then the bottom left is some peatland restoration that also has a storm capacity installed within it. So ordinarily with peat restoration, you would just wet it to the level that you want. It doesn't necessarily provide you with any additional storm storage, but these ones do. And then the bottom right hand corner is the starting point of a kested hedge, which is interrupting flow pathways that we're getting down and causing big surface water impacts into, in that case, Glenby. So we had a huge amount of help from some very talented and dedicated farmers who even assessed some of these structures in storm conditions and altered how they work, as well as environmental ENGOs that were instrumental in making sure that we were able to deliver the scale of the projects that we were. And I think it helped us understand a lot more about what was effective, what was cheaper, what was the kind of biggest bang for your buck, and then what kind of had other benefits that people might pay for as well, such as carbon or kind of water quality benefits. And and this was underpinned, as I said before, with kind of some of the best kind of monitoring and evaluation that we could get with Lancaster University and their internationally recognised research team. So obviously one of the things we wanted to understand is how communities felt about natural flood management. Obviously in some cases there was some nervousness around it because it was a new thing and a bit unknown. But over time, I think more and more communities have embraced what it can do, and also the empowerment that it can give as well, in terms of that people feel that they can be part of creating a solution for their own for their own risks and things like that they face in their communities, which I think is hugely valuable. I think the scale of the risk that people face also plays a bit of a part in how NFM is viewed. If you're at risk from enormous storms like the size of Desmond or those ones that are over 1 in 100, then probably the benefits to NFM probably feel like a little bit less and don't feel like they're robust enough. But where if you're at risk in smaller kind of storm conditions, then I think that you're more likely to see and feel the benefit from it. We worked with some terrific landowners and farmers who were wanting to do what they could to protect their neighbours and their communities immediately downstream of their landholdings. But the farming community can't do it on its own. It can't be done just on altruism. Land is at a premium, and we need to find ways to provide payment rates for that. So in terms of the evidence, there's an awful lot of papers that have been produced now, especially with our colleagues at Lancaster University, and if you kind of Google Lancaster University and NFM, you'll find a lot of those papers if you want to do a deeper dive into it. And we've looked at like what kind of situations it tends to work best in, what types of storm events it's most able to deal with, and then the types of catchments that it's most able to help with as well. So broadly on that is that NFM largely is suited to smaller catchments, primarily because you can make a bigger difference with it. The bigger the catchment gets, the more water that you need to attenuate, that you need to try and slow down, and obviously then the more that you need to kind of pay in order to be able to make those differences. So the costs kind of go up with the size of the catchment. So on the whole, there hasn't been an awful lot of money for this, so it's tended to suit those communities that are in smaller catchments. And as I said before, it also tends to suit communities that are at those higher risks, so up to sort of 1 in 25, 1 in 30 sort of storm situations, rather than those ones that are 1 in 100. That said, we do have a lot of evidence that suggests we make a big difference even in bigger storms. So at Flimby, on the watercourses there, we can show that we're reducing the risk by about 5% in a 1 in 100. And that shows that NFM can work in collaboration with more traditional flood defence styles in terms of walls and other defensive things that the agency is probably more known for. But it does show that you can even take, some of that risk away in bigger storm situations. Even in the storms the size of Desmond, the research done by Lancaster University has shown that you can make a difference even in the storms the size of Desmond. Tree planting continues to pump water back into the atmosphere, even in those very, very large storms. And there's a really good paper on that for those that want to look into that. But you do need a lot of interventions. The scale at which you need to work, if you're going to try and equate it to something like a traditional flood defence system, means that you need a lot of these interventions, because each one is relatively small in comparison to the sort of large storage units that the agency would put in. So you need more of them. On the plus side, they do tend to do different things for the landscape, so you get other benefits. So you get drought benefits, as we've seen this. We've got some evidence of that from this summer. You get soil quality benefits in terms of its ability to retain water and its structure and its ability to allow more nutrients to move around. And you get water quality benefits, and obviously you do get some carbon and some, in some places, some fairly significant biodiversity benefits. But it is very much dependent on the type of NFM interventions that you put into the landscape. So in terms of what's next for NFM and this county, we will continue to develop the evidence of what it can do, where it's best, and the types of locations that it's best suited for. We're continually looking for opportunities for funding of how we might be able to do more of this. The images on this particular slide, you can see some restored and improved kested hedges on a slope on that top left hand side, and then top right hand side is quite a large earth swale that protects some farm infrastructure and then also stops water from getting into a surface water course that causes flooding a bit further downstream. And then bottom left is how we're trying to build in some longevity into some of the structures. So it's a leaky wooden dam, and we've started to weave willow round it to improve it, so that over time, as the wood starts to degrade, you've actually got a full, thick, kind of more living wooden structure around it. And then the bottom right hand side is a river that was very, very canalised and very straight, and the water was moving at on average about 4 miles an hour. And we've re-meandered it, and it's got some extra storage bits in high flow conditions, and now that water only moves at about 1.4 miles an hour. So it's considerably smoother, and therefore you're getting this delay in the peak waters by the time it gets to the community. So we're very much focused on how we can do the right things in the right place and to make a real difference. And by real, what we mean is something that communities can actually notice, a tangible difference to them. Obviously, this is playing out against a background of climate change, and we're kind of getting extremes of conditions. So, the summer was quite drought focused, and obviously we've had more than our fair share of floods, and climate change means that both of those things will become more common as we go forward. So we do need more of this in the landscape for those reasons. The funding I mentioned at the beginning, which was the extra £6.6 million we've got, so that's come through the flood risk innovation project that was launched by the government last year. We've managed to secure our little piece of that. The project itself is called the Cumbria Innovative Flood Resilience Project, or CIFRE for short. On the screen are the primary project partners, but we will have an awful lot more different partners as we kind of move forward, as we get into the deployment phase of it. So the project itself has 6 primary work streams. NFM at a scale enough to move wristbands. So wristbands are how the Environment Agency and other risk management authorities gain funding to protect properties. So you need to move a property from a wristband, say they're at significant risk, and you need that move them into moderate risk, and you will get an allocation of money for each property that you do that. And if you can then produce a scheme for that amount of money, then you'll gain funding. So that's one part of this, is to see whether or not NFM can do that. We think it can in a few targeted locations, and we're just going to explore that. The other bit is farming and community officers. So these are a variation of a catchment sensitive farming officer. The monitoring, warning and modelling will be handled by Lancaster University. And again, this is to make sure that we're doing the right thing in the right place, and that we're then monitoring the results of that so that we can share that with both locally and with government, so that we can hopefully kind of try and improve how things get done in the future. Community preparedness and resilience. This is the community's ability to be able to be prepared for a storm, how you bounce back from a storm. We've got some great advocates of this already within the county that have been working very hard and have been tested far too many times, unfortunately. But it will be things like, how can we do more training? How can we improve equipment that we might be able to provide for them? So that might be things like extra pumps or radios, or even cameras, so that they don't, so that they can monitor river levels more safely. So a lot of different aspects, a lot of moving parts in that particular part of it. The blended finance option is where we're going to look to see where we can make some differences in terms of, can we show benefits enough that would incentivize private funding to help us with some of these aims. So whether or not that was on flood management side of it, on natural flood management side, whether there's perhaps a water quality benefit or something like that that another company could pay for. And the aim of it is to try and see if we can make our money go further. The strategic evaluation and dissemination is really just a wrap up of all of that. So taking those work streams, understanding what they mean, and then presenting that as a package where we can sort of show what the benefits have been. All of this is really to provide evidence to support a strategic targeting and funding structure for Cumbria going forwards. We've got we've got a high risk kind of catchment in many ways, and this is just really trying to understand how we can kind of bring all of that together to be able to find ways to produce funding and then replicate what we're doing within this project across the county. And then kind of a slightly almost loftier ambition, I guess, is to provide the evidence to help influence local and national policy funding decisions. So that's how do we ensure that we've got more money going forwards in the future for this type of work? Because we've got lots and lots of smaller communities that are at high risk of flooding in this county. So natural flood management at scale, what do I mean by that? So our working rule of thumb, and this is kind of based on some research done by Lancaster University, is roughly 10,000 cubic meters per square kilometre. If we can mop up that kind of amount of water within a landscape, you get close to what an agency structure would do for a flood risk community. That's obviously quite a challenge. It's a big amount of water. But if you get even relatively close to that, you can start to make a significant difference for communities. And again, there's some flexibility in that 10,000, but that's the kind of aim. So what you'll see more from this project is probably less leaky dams, or if you do, they're going to be like the ones on the bottom left-hand corner there. That's roughly 80 metres long and 1 metre high. So that stores quite a large volume of water. You will see more kind of bunds like the left-hand top, and ideally some more things like river meandering, because that section of meander stored quite a significant volume of water. And when you couple that with the fact that it's got reduced speed, you make a significant difference if you can do that on long enough stretches of water. All of this needs kind of fitting into what is a working agricultural landscape, so we need to work very carefully with farmers, and we want to co-design that for farmers as well, because beyond just protecting communities, we want to ensure that we can try and help make farm businesses themselves more resilient in terms of both for flooding and for drought, so that we make sure that the infrastructure itself is protected potentially. Over and above the flood benefits, we will also be sort of evaluating how these structures work to sort of secure and slow down the release of phosphates and nitrogens, as well as carbon reduction, because we think there may be a market for that within our blended finance model. Farming and community officers, one of the things we learned from the first batch of work with the NFM program was that we needed a trusted intermediary to be able to sort of engage with landowners and to help unlock some funding, so that it wasn't all just being done through for altruistic reasons. And the catchment sensitive farming officers have been that link into the farming community for a long time. And with the changes that are coming within kind of environmental funding, agricultural funding, with the environmental land management scheme that's due to come on stream at some point soon, that kind of replaces countryside stewardship and some of the other funding streams that have been there. The idea is to try and help unlock some funding that would provide long-term sort of funding routes for landowners to become involved with flood work that would protect their property and potentially protect properties further downstream. So we know that we get some additional benefits through all of that in terms of flood risk and kind of water quality and biodiversity, but we also want to foster some closer relationships between kind of communities and the land and how that's managed above them. Monitoring and the warning and the modelling. So we've trialled this within the NFM programme, and we were able to give communities effectively a kind of a warning system on smaller watercourses. We've got a couple of different ways of kind of technology that helps us with that. So the bottom two pictures are two kind of warning structures that allow us to kind of gather data on exactly what the water is doing and when. So they're tied to a rain gauge, so that you can equate the rainfall and the volume at that particular location very accurately. It's on a 5-minute kind of recording, and they're transmitted every 15 minutes, so exactly the same as the agency warning structures are as well. And they tend to be better on smaller watercourses, but then we've got a lot of communities that are at risk from those that aren't necessarily on big main rivers, where the agency has lots of kind of gauging weirs and things like that, and able to provide warnings. It also enables us to see the before and after, because we will have a set of data for before we've done the interventions and then afterwards, and then we can turn that into effectively what we think the damages avoided are, and that helps us potentially get funding going forward. So we've got some monitoring already installed, and our sort of initial models are underway at present as well, looking at what we can potentially do in certain places within Cumbria. With the blended finance aspect of the project, what we're looking to do is to see what measures that we can stack using private financing. So the idea is that you can have benefits that also have flood benefits, but also have other benefits, so things like water quality or air quality or carbon reduction, that could potentially be paid for by other sectors. On the back of this, you could also look to potentially stack things like things that would help with nutrient neutrality or biodiversity net gain. And again, you can provide opportunities for people to buy into something that is already a larger than the sum of its parts kind of operation, in terms of that you already have places that you will want to work, and therefore by adding these bits on top, we're effectively creating a portfolio with which we can sort of hopefully use to speak to landowners about and say, right, okay, these are the types of things that we would be able to do within that land holding. And these are the benefits that you would get in terms of funding, either as capital expenditure up front, or potentially even sort of ongoing payments beyond that, because of the life of the project and then the life of what those benefits would be. So we've teamed up with 3 Keel for this. They've been working with their lens system within Cumbria for the last several years, so they already have a kind of a marketplace that's already tested, and they already have some people on board that are also already interested in the types of things that we might be doing. Underpinning all of this will be the kind of academic aspect, that it will be underpinned with our partners at Lancaster University, so where we'll be able to evidence some of those benefits. So we'll be able to evidence kind of a before and after. Okay, so this is what the water quality was like before the intervention, this is what it was like after the intervention, and therefore that amount of whatever the benefit is, whether or not that's a reduction in nitrates or carbon or phosphates, could be something that could then potentially be traded, and at least would have an understanding of what those benefits are and how scalable that is. The community preparedness and resilience side of things. So we'll be starting off with kind of effectively a baseline within communities to understand what their current understanding of their flood risk is, what that looks like when we start to add in things like climate change, and then kind of what their kind of aspirations might be about how they want to try and alter things within their kind of local community and their local surroundings. And in addition to that, it's about sort of how helping them to learn from other communities that have already been through this. We've got quite a few different communities within Cumbria that have been flooded several times, so they've learned some very, very valuable lessons. And the idea is that we take the learning that those guys have got and we transfer it to places that haven't necessarily been on that journey yet. And also we've got some communities that have been quite heavily involved with kind of things like natural flood management, and it's like how we kind of take those forward, and how we kind of give them the opportunity to learn from what those people have been through. And at the same time, we're kind of like working on kind of emergency response and things of that nature at the same time. And as I said before, this is all underpinned by strategic evaluation and dissemination. So this will be us kind of providing peer-reviewed papers and things like that to government and locally, and then also being able to show all of this to the public and sort of say, like, this is what we found, this is what we tend to find works best, and then we can hopefully kind of start to roll this out in a kind of in a wider manner going forward once we've proven this. And then hopefully as well trying to sort of see whether or not we can alter some sort of like how funding gets allocated for things like this in the future. So rather than just focusing on like really large flood schemes, there are lots of communities that are at risk from smaller events, and it's whether or not we can help them in terms of like being able to provide some benefit to them in terms of flood protection. That project is not on its own. There's an awful lot of other projects that are out there at the moment in terms of projects that are looking at different different aspects of that, and they're just some of them listed on here. Over and above that, within some of our other partners, within some of the environmental NGOs, they're working constantly on bits of NFM all over the place. The Rivers Trust and the Wildlife Trust and the National Trust have all been doing this, along with Woodland Trust and Cumbria Woodlands and others, have been continually seeing what they might be able to do for communities using these sort of more natural approaches going forwards. And that's it. I hope that was okay.